If that's okay. I know it's not as common of one. It's right before Kuf Chaf Aleph, which is very common. But I thought since we said Kuf Chaf Aleph this morning, Kuf Chaf Aleph tonight, I feel like let's spread the love. Okay, Kuf Chaf. Shir Amalos El Adonai Batzara Sadi Rasi V'Yananini Adonai Hatzila Nafshi Nisvas Sheker Milashon Remiyah Ma Yitin Lecha U'ma Yosif Lach Lashon Remiyah Chitzei Gibor Shlumim Im Gachalei V'Samim Al Yali Ki Gavti Meshech Shachanti Im Alei Kedar Rabas Shachna La Nafshi Im Sonei Shalom Ani Shalom Ki Adaber Hima La Milchama Achiru Chobes Yisrael Masun V'Sarot. I feel like it gets left out. I'm sorry to say. It's like the little brother, Kuf Chaf, because it's so close to Kuf Chaf Aleph, which everyone loves. So, I don't know. Just my own shtick.
Did you tell us to say that? Don't we say it?
It's one of the, because it mentions Milchama, Shalom.
Everybody has a different list of what you
Yeah, that's usually in the top 7. I mean, it starts with 121 and 130. Those are the two that everyone loves.
Well, now they say 142 because it's exactly.
Right, Kuf Mem Beis
It
is
is
good too.
exactly.
Right, Kuf Mem Beis is the popular one.
Yeah.
They're all popular. They're all good. I can promise you that. But I want to thank Barry and Esther Papel for sponsoring today's shiur. Memory of Esther's parents, her mother Devorah Chaya Bas Yehuda, and father Shalom Lipa Ben Leib Alter Halevi. Shamos should have an aliyah. Should have an aliyah, I should say. Okay, so I thought we'd do something different today. Probably finish today, maybe just quickly finish next week, even though it won't be Asar B'Teves, it'll still be the extension of it with Asar B'Teves falling out on Friday. But, because the end is really the future, so it might be appropriate to at least start next year, but probably go back to Tefilah by next week. In this fast of Asar B'Teves, so ordinarily I wouldn't give a whole shiur on a Sunday morning dedicated towards Asar B'Teves, probably not. But I think it's appropriate because of all the questions of getting men, women, and children, especially children, want to know, especially the 12 and 13-year-olds, in the group and in my students, why we're fasting on a Friday. Really quite
10
unique.
years ago, it was the same thing. It was my mother's birthday.
2013.
She
Very
passed
good.
away Thursday.
I remember like it was yesterday. You know why I remember like it was yesterday? Because I was looking through my notes and I saw 2013. It also happened sometime in between them that you forgot because you blacked it out of your memory because it was the year of 2020 and everyone just forgot everything of 2020. It happened in 2020 last. But everything happened in 2020. Not just in the world, but also everything, it's also rare, 2020 was the most possible days you could ever have of Slichos. Erev Pesach was on Shabbos, which is the craziest situation ever. And Asar B'Teves fell on a Friday. In a leap year, in a non-leap year, all three of those things happen together. When one happens, the others happen. But in a leap year, for example, Erev Pesach will not fall out on Shabbos this year, if I understand correctly. So in a non-leap year, it's not guaranteed to happen. In a leap year, like it is this year. So 2013 and 2020, it's like a 3-time per like 16, 17 year situation. So it's quite rare. There's not exactly a mathematical equation to it. It's not like 3 of every 5 years or whatnot. It's definitely not nice like once every 4 years, like a secular leap year. But okay, so Asar B'Teves falling on a Friday is incredibly interesting. Happens to be, I wouldn't say the easiest fast, but falling out on a Friday, you're getting things done for Shabbos. You're missing lunch. You can still get your breakfast unless you're a really late riser. The fast is starting after 6 o'clock and it ends at 5-ish, 5:08, 5:10, something like that. So I'm not a great faster, but I'll say you could definitely have your coffee and a big breakfast, and then just miss lunch. That's it, and have an early dinner, which we probably do anyways on a normal winter Friday night. In bed by 8, right? I mean, it's how often do we do that? We have dinners done by 6:30 and in bed by 8. That's not bad. So, nonetheless. This Friday will be Asar B'Teves. First things first, why are we fasting on Asar B'Teves? So the Rambam says in source 1, Asirei B'Teves, he calls it Asiri, not Asara, same idea. Shebo Samach Melech Bavel Nebuchadnezzar Harash al Yerushalayim. So the 10th of Teves, that's when Nebuchadnezzar, of course, is the king of Bavel. So he sieged. What's that? I wonder if sieged or besieged. I'm always confused. If I'm not corrected, then I'm not. Then I'm okay with it. I think you besiege it, right?
The
Okay.
person, the object.
The object is yes. Okay. So the city was sieged, though. Is that correct? Did I get it wrong? You know, if no one disagrees,
Placed it under siege is works.
okay, yeah. If no one argues, I'm okay because that means that we're all confused together. But okay, so Harasha al Yerushalayim v'aviyu b'matzor u'b'matzor. So okay, so the Beis Hamikdash is about to be destroyed, but we still have months to go for that to take place. So this is the 10th of Teves, right? Because we're months before Av, and by the first Beis Hamikdash. So what happens? Nebuchadnezzar is surrounding Yerushalayim, so it's clearly the beginning of the end. But the Beis Hamikdash we know doesn't actually get burnt to the ground until the 9th, really the 10th of Av, right? Many, many months later. Av's in the summer, Teves is in the winter. So we know we have a good 6-7 months for that. And the Orach HaShulchan, that's Rabbi Michael Epstein, lived in the early 20th century. Lithuania. Sorry? Yes. So he lived in Lithuania. Source 2, Valki Asara B'Teves Haisaschalas Hatzaros. It's like the beginning of the end. Haschalas Hatzaros, Al King Gvul Etayni Sadoros. A lot of things happen over that 8-month period. You have to understand. A lot of terrible things happen during that 8-month period. But this was like the beginning. Like, okay, now they successfully besieged us around Yerushalayim. We knew the end was inevitable. That was coming to an end.
This is before if did some.
So Tzom Gedalia was before, right? Because even though Tishrei is in between these 2 months, but Gedalia is murdered different time, I believe. Should get my years straight. Okay, good question. So Rav Eliyahu Lopian, so he explains based off a pasuk in Koheles, which compares a person's demise to a fish who is trapped in a net. Kedagim shenachazim b'mitzuda. The fish doesn't realize it's over until when? Until the fish gets pulled from the water, right? But really, in reality, what's the real demise? It gets caught in the net, even though it has water, right? It's still in the water. Its real demise was getting caught in the net in the first place. So that's what Asar B'Teves is. Asar B'Teves, we were caught in the net, but we still had water. But then Tisha B'Av was when we were pulled out of the water, and that was the end. Okay, so let's talk. That's just Asar B'Teves, but let's talk about fasting on Friday. Can you fast on Friday? Well, the answer has to be yes. Right? We're having a fast on Friday. Generally speaking, the answer is no. Interestingly enough, we don't fast. In fact, we will not fast any other fast on a Friday ever, other than Asar B'Teves. Now, I know what you're thinking. Isn't Tisha B'Av and Yom Kippur more important than Asar B'Teves? The answer is yes, but they just don't fall out on Friday. Right, exactly. Practically speaking, Asar and Tisha B'Av will never fall out on a Friday. I imagine it's interesting with Tisha B'Av, but Yom Kippur, obviously we fast on Shabbos. All of the reasons that we're going to learn today of why we generally don't fast on a Friday are connected to Shabbos. So for sure we'd fast. So for sure Yom Kippur, if we fast on Shabbos, we would fast on Friday. But it just doesn't happen. It can't work out that way. 10th of
Then
Tishrei.
you can't prepare.
But Tisha B'Av becomes the Nikha.
Yeah, that's on Sunday. It's interesting. Would we apply? That's if it falls on Shabbos, we push it off to Sunday.
Right.
Interesting. If theoretically, I was just thinking this. If Tisha B'Av would fall out on a Friday, would we push it off to Sunday? I don't know because it's never happened in the history of mankind. But interesting thought.
There were 6 or 7 months till the Korban. Couldn't B'nai Israel have done tshuva?
You'd think, right? Yeah, they should have. And some were. It's interesting. It's discussed what was the final. That's the real discussion. Maybe this helps us appreciate Asar B'Teves. When was the final verdict? Meaning, just because the Beis Hamikdash didn't burn to the ground, the final verdict may have been done. Interesting. Could they have done tshuva from that 6-7 month period? It's a good question. The Nevi'im were sure trying for years prior. I mean, Yirmiyahu's trying for tens of years, right? So I think that at that point, whatever tshuva they did do, if they did, which I doubt it, because if they didn't do it for the years prior, theoretically, could they have? I mean, I don't see why they wouldn't be able to. Hashem accepts almost all cases of tshuva, so I don't know why they wouldn't have accepted it. But should they have seen the end was coming? They should have seen the end was coming years before, right? I mean, Yirmiyahu's telling them and telling them and telling them. So this was real, because now the siege is happening.
I mean, they should have seen the end was coming.
Yeah, that's a Jewish history in a nutshell, right? I mean, we don't see We usually don't catch on. I mean, but Yonah and Nineveh is a good example of people realizing and doing tshuva. So we took. Sorry, and they were not Jews. That's why they listened. Right. That's why they didn't complain. Right. Excellent. Good point. Okay. Fair enough. Yonah was. So. All right. So the Shulchan Aruch says, "Im kibel lis anos be'erev Shabbos, tzarich lis anos ad tzeitzah kol chava." This is source 3. So essentially, how it works is he's not even talking about a public fast, a Tanit Tzibor. He's saying in general, they used to fast a lot more than we do. They used to fast religiously for parents' yard sites. That stopped. That's a more recent situation where we stopped fasting for parents' yard sites. That was a very serious fast for both parents' yard sites to fast. Some people still do, but very, very few. Once they found out they can give money instead, they went with that. Sponsor a tikkun and you give tzedakah. They said, well, let's do that instead of fast. Okay, everyone get around that. How much would you pay to not have to fast? So that was the answer. But nonetheless, he's really talking. There was a tainis chalom. Someone had a nightmare, for lack of better terminology.
What about Beis Hay?
I'm sorry?
Beis Hay.
Beis Hay. Oh, Bahab. Yeah, Bahab. That's still done today by some. Bet Hey Bet. That's the Monday, after the two Yom Tovim, right? So that's Monday and Thursday are Yemei Ratzon because Moshe Rabbeinu went up to Har Sinai on Monday and came down on a Thursday, or vice versa, but it was Monday, Thursday. So those are the two special Yemei Ratzon. That's why davening's longer on Monday and Thursday, you may have noticed. For those who have been to a Shachas on a Monday or Thursday. So those are all days that are fasted. A lot of people, that out of all that we mentioned, those are probably the most common. So I actually know people who do Bahab, it's called. Bahab just stands for Bet, Hey, Bet. Bet is 2, Monday. Hey is 5, Thursday. Bet is the following Monday. Monday, Thursday, Monday. It's discussed in the Mishnah Tainus among other places. Okay, good point. But the Ramah said, the Shulchan Aruch says, if you're going to fast on Erev Shabbos, you need to take it in the Shabbos, which is interesting. I would have thought, let it be broken, the second Shabbos comes in. But no, you got to take it through, and it's a discussion here if you have to complete it, but you have to, in a Tainus Tzibor, the Ramah says, you have to complete. So that would mean, Tzeitzah Kol Chavim, 3 stars.
So what happens like in the southern hemisphere now, where it's the summer, people might start Shabbos early and end shul before...
That's a good question. I wonder if they're allowed... I don't think so. I would think this Shabbos, they're not starting early, I would imagine. Because you can start Shabbos as early as about an hour and a quarter, hour and a half before sunset, as we do in the summer. But here you need to wait until Tzeitzah Kol Chavim to break your fast. It's interesting, by the time you get home, maybe you have shul a little earlier, so by the time you get home, we'll all be done shul. Well, I mean, if someone lives right next door to shul, maybe not. But, by the time you finish shul, the fast is going to be over. So maybe they daven a little earlier, so that by the time they get home, fast is completely over.
And you can have wine,
Yeah, we'll learn that. Excellent. Wine, meat, the everything. The fast is over. And you should. It's Shabbos. It's not like, well, maybe this Shabbos we don't have. No. Okay, so that's how a Friday fast works. If we have a public fast like Asar B'Teves, take it into Tzeitzah Kol Chavim no earlier. That Tzeitzah Kol Chavim is 3 stars. Falls out, I don't know, 5:09 or something like that this week. What about davening? Friday's davening is going to look a little different. So this is the source in 4, back to the Aruch HaShulchan. So he says, first things first, Lefi Akfiyus Shalanu, what about Shabbos? So if Asar B'Teves can fall on Erev Shabbos, what about Shabbos? He says, it's just practical, kind of like you said before, Francine. Yashal Lios Asar B'Teves B'Shabbos said by Tisha B'Av by Yom Kippur, it can never fall on a Friday. Similarly, Asar B'Teves can never fall out on Shabbos. Just can't. I'm not sure what we do if it would, although we are going to learn a source that says something fascinating. Yashal Lios Asar B'Teves B'Shabbos. Asar B'Teves can't fall out on Shabbos, just practically. V'rak be'er, my students ask me all the time, why? It's a fair question. I don't know. It's a calendar. Just, it's mathematics. That's the answer. I don't know how that works, but I just know that the 10th of Teves will never ever fall out on the 7th day of the week. It just won't happen. Just like Yom Kippur will never fall. What is it? Wednesday, one of those days. I don't know why. Friday, it could never fall on a Friday. Just mathematics based off of understanding the calendar, and now we have computers, so we don't really focus on the calendar so much, but we still know the practical.
Because even even not just a month. You also have a couple months that have
Yeah,
an extra day. That
correct. So there's not exactly. It's not like April, May, and November, right? It's 29 into 30. You're right. So that's why you have 2 days Rosh Chodesh. That means there's an extra day in the previous month. So that's the 30th day of the previous month. Yeah, it's not as simple. It's not as simple as a solar calendar. Okay. So nonetheless. So it cannot fall on Shabbos. Rak Erev Shabbos Yachal Asar B'Teves Lachol. As we now know, 5 days from now, Asar B'Teves can in fact fall out on a Friday. The Az V'Sanim Bo Mashlimin, and you would fast, and you'd finish the fast. There's a discussion. The commentators, well, okay, so let's fast Asar B'Teves, but as we're going to learn, you're not supposed to go into Shabbos fasting. So let's break the fast. So we'll fast, call it a fast day, call it a tanis, but let's break the fast so you avoid the halachic problem, as we'll see, of going into Shabbos fasting. So it's still a fast day. It's kind of like someone who's really ill and needs to have shiurim on Yom Kippur. They're still halachically fasting because assuming they're not deathly ill, but someone who just needs certain things medically, let's just say, so they're taking an ounce of whatever it is that's not considered drinking. It's not, it's only done in certain circumstances, but it's still it's considered as if they're fasting. So it's the same thing. It'll be like everyone fasted. You break the fast when you absolutely have to. It's just a much earlier breaking of the fast. But no, the Aruch HaShulchan Paskins, and this is how we hold, you finish the fast. What about the changes to the davening? So we know we read a special Kriyas HaTorah, it's called Vayichal, right? So we read the special Kriyas HaTorah on a fast day, and we would do that in Shachris and in Mincha. We're going to talk about this in Mincha in a second, because Mincha is different. Mincha, he says, it's interesting, maybe you shouldn't lane during Mincha. Anyone can figure out why maybe we shouldn't lane during Friday Mincha? Based off of why we don't want to eat, it's the same concept. We don't want to lane too close to Shabbos. Not because what you think there's anything wrong with laning on Shabbos, i.e. I refer you to every Shabbos of your lives, where we do in fact take out a Sefer Torah and lane. But nonetheless, there's an interesting concept called Kavod Shabbos. Those are two words you've heard before, but maybe not applied in an exact practical halachic place. What do I mean by Kavod Shabbos? It's not Kavod Shabbos to lane right before Shabbos. Think about it. Why? Well, you got to move on. We got to get ready for Shabbos. We're going to sit there and lane for 20 minutes? So maybe it's not, interesting way of looking at it, halachically, Kavod Shabbos to lane Erev Shabbos. Longer davening might ruin my Shabbos preparation. I might not be able to get something done for Shabbos. Interesting. The Anshe Mamad, it's Mishnah and Tainus, but various groups in the Beis Hamikdash where they would participate. We had the Kohanim going to do the Avodah, Levim doing the Duchen, doing singing, doing all these other things, right? So the Yisraelim of that group, the Anshe Mamad, so they would go ahead and they would lane as part of their Avodah. They would learn Torah, they would read, they would daven extra, so they would in fact lane. But the Mishnah says on Friday, their shift, they did not lane because they had to get ready for Shabbos. So maybe we'd apply the same principle here. Kavod Shabbos. I don't think we ever would have thought to apply those words, Kavod Shabbos, to not laning on a mincha so that I can prepare for Shabbos. That's why we do. But we do in fact lane Shabbos mincha, Friday mincha. You will notice that our mincha will be earlier this week. For those who come to shul Friday night, our Friday night mincha usually is 10 minutes after candle lighting. This week it'll be 10 minutes before candle lighting because it's a longer davening.
How about tefillin?
Tefillin, excellent. So we'll get to, I think, the Arizal. But nonetheless, so we don't only wear tefillin on Tisha B'Av. All other fasts, you don't wear tefillin on Mincha. You only wear tefillin on Tisha B'Av, but not on Mincha, but not other fasts. Some used to have the minhag to wear tefillin on Mincha in general. So then it gets a little tricky because you got to take it off by Shabbos. I think the Arizal's minhag was that. So then you don't want to daven Mincha too early before Shabbos, which is why the minhag became, when Asar B'Teves falls out on Friday, they daven early Mincha, which is recommended. And the shul's offering both. Practically, it may just not be practical for some. But we are offering a 12:30 Mincha based off that, because those that used to have the custom to wear tefillin can't wear tefillin so close to Shabbos, so they had an early Mincha. That's why we're doing a 12:30 Mincha as well. But for those that's just not practical for, we will offer a Mincha right before candlelighting. Okay. So, really, we shouldn't lane. So why do we lane? It's interesting. The Magen Avram says, prepare in advance. What do you mean? You got to run around getting ready for Shabbos. Well, we can do it. I don't know. For those of you who work on Friday and make Shabbos, How have you been doing it in the winter? Thursday night?
Great
I don't know.
difficulty.
With great difficulty, but you've been doing it for 42 years.
24.
Okay. Let's not go crazy, Fancy. All right. I thought I was being nice, but still practical. But you've been doing it for years. Like, you figured it out. Thursday night, I imagine a lot. I know with Amanda. I mean, Thursday night is a significant help with that respect. You know, if you're not getting off of work till or whatever, you're not getting home from work till you can't put up whatever, or you're cooking and freezing. Whatever. We figured it out after a few years, but it's still incredibly difficult. But the Magen Avraham says, so we figured out this whole laning thing too. If it's important, you do it. Don't say, I'm not going to lane on Erev Shabbos Mincha because I need to go ahead and get ready before. I don't know. You figured it out for years. So what's the difference? So prepare in advance. And in fact,
you can lane Thursday night for Friday.
You're right, but like, come on, you know, get. So it's an extra 8 minutes. You know, it's part of the. When he says also we're prepared in advance, so that's not the issue. Okay, so the Darkei Moshe, that's the Ramah, his other work, where Moshe Isserlis. So in source 5, so he says as follows. He says that some people actually did have the minhag to get rid of laning mincha, but that's not our minhag. That's what the Shulchan Aruch says. The Shulchan Aruch says in source 6, we do lane. We lane, even though you got a lot to do, you got a lot going on, doesn't matter, prepare in advance. But it would be better to daven mincha to avoid this issue altogether. Daven early mincha, so this way you have time, but that's not practical for a lot of people to daven mincha at 12:30 on a Friday. But for those who it is, it's strongly recommended, based off of the reasons we discussed.
So you do Hanukkah also? You both daven mincha early?
Very good. So it's almost 2 out of 3 Fridays. Yeah, Hanukkah is a different reason. Interestingly enough, Hanukkah is that you want to daven mincha before you light the Hanukkah candles, so that you light the Hanukkah candles and go right into Shabbos, as opposed to lighting the Hanukkah candles and then davening mincha. Well, what do you mean? Once you light the Hanukkah candles, you've essentially established that it's now Hanukkah. It's now Friday night, right? That's why you then light Shabbos candles. Now you're davening mincha. Mincha's Friday afternoon. Interesting way of looking at it, but excellent. Very similar. Okay, so what are the problems with fasting on a Friday? What do we think? What's the problem? Who cares about that?
Taste the food you're cooking.
That's true. That's actually brought down. Very good. It was actually discussed because they used to be a much more. I don't know if you're saying that tongue in cheek or you're being serious, but that's actually.
I'm serious.
I'm very serious. We don't joke this early in the morning. This is a pretty serious. At 9:16, it's not a time to joke. She's right. It's actually discussed. Excellent. That Ruth says that we have this idea with you're supposed to be able to taste the food, which discusses this idea of Sfaradim are much more mako with this by tasting on a fast day. I'm not going to go into the intricacies of that, but there you go. So have you tasted food on a fast day? I don't know.
I'm not that sardic.
Right. I'm sardic enough to make rice on Pesach.
I would give it to my husband.
Right. Let him taste it.
So with a bris.
Right. Could be. Maybe if you have a reason to eat, maybe. Very good. So first things first. So the problem with fasting, for that, it's really the opposite of fasting. First, focus on the opposite of fasting. Meaning, why do we usually not fast? You're not supposed to have a big meal on a Friday, right? I mean, you can have your lunch, whatever, but don't have like a huge, don't go out to eat and have a big meal. If you're going to meet a friend, sorry? Except for Purim, very good. That happened also COVID, didn't it? No, that was the year after COVID.
Yeah.
Where it was, where Purim fell on a Friday. It was another weird, we had that Masuda, and very good. That's key. Don't have a Suda on a normal Friday that you're not accustomed to having during the week. So meaning you could have a normal, whatever you have Tuesday for lunch, but don't go out and have a bigger lunch than you had on Thursday, on Friday. Even if, they used to get, actually that wasn't so uncommon, they used to get married right before Shabbos, so they go into Shabbos married, so maybe they have a Sudas Erison, like an engagement Suda. If they kavod Shabbos, it's not kavod Shabbos, you want to go into Shabbos hungry. But, so then great. So I have an answer. If you're supposed to go into Shabbos hungry, fast, right? I mean, that's a great way to be hungry. Fast, don't eat. So it's interesting. So he ends up saying that what's the reason we don't have a big meal on an Erev Shabbos? Because we want to have an appetite going into Shabbos. So what's the problem with fasting? Well, interestingly enough, fasting will cause the same issue, right? Because you won't have an appetite. Yeah, you're going to be really hungry, but what happens after you break your fast, right? You have one thing and then you won't be able to eat a meal, right? It's usually what happens, although everyone's looking at me like, no, I don't think you've seen me fast. What I can do after a fast. Okay, fair enough. But usually what happens is you have to have, it's like, kind of like, think like not too little, not too much, right? You don't want to have too much, but you also don't want to have too little. It's going to affect your appetite in that respect. So, it's interesting. Take a look at source 8. It'll take a few more minutes. Kavod Shabbos. What's meant by Kavod Shabbos? Yesha kasva tam shemitoch tiras hasuda lo yisasku b'tzorchei Shabbos. So it's not that, it's nothing to do with your appetite. The Mishnah Berurah says, at least one Mishnah Berurah says, it means don't have a big meal on Friday, on a normal Friday. Why? You have a big meal, you're gonna ruin your Shabbos preparation time. Don't sit down there for an all-you-can-eat buffet. Not because you're gonna ruin your appetite. That's gonna be a little later on, right? Because it's interesting. In source 11 he says another reason. Why don't we? Let's take a look. Source 11. So why don't we normally fast Erev Shabbos? So the first approach was. It'll take away, it'll mess up with your Shabbos preparations. Don't eat too much, don't eat too little. But the second idea is, well, okay, because we want you to be hungry. Well, if I'm fasting, then what do you mean I want to be hungry? If I'm fasting, I'll be very hungry. That's the problem, you'll be too hungry, right? It's kind of like, before Thanksgiving, your Thanksgiving meal. You don't sit there and have a big lunch, right? But you don't fast either. I don't know, you have eat something. I feel like, you feel like you're talking to your grandchildren, or your children. You're saying, eat something just to hold you over, but dinner's in an hour, right? It's the same concept, right?
You feed the kids, before the Seder.
Right. But you're not feeding them, that's a little, okay. But yes, that's true. You're not feeding them, the Seder. You're feeding them some soup, so they stop complaining. That's what you're doing. Okay, so the Mishnah Berurah says you want to be hungry, but not too hungry. So it's kind of like a fine line there. Which one is it? And he ends up saying, what's the problem? The in Lasanos Erev Shabbos, Mishnah elsewhere says that we don't fast Erev Shabbos because Shabbos kishuma una. You don't want to go into Shabbos starving. So you don't want to go into Shabbos full. You don't want to go to Shabbos starving. You want to go into Shabbos just right. Okay. Imloshu istinis kol kach shemochal bayom lo yochal la'achal b'layla le'tevon az minag tovhu im ein mazik lo hatainis. So somewhere in the middle. Let's leave it at that, right? But that's this idea where the Mishnah Berurah tells me that you don't want to go in hungry, you don't want to go in full, so somewhere in the middle. So that's why we usually don't fast on Erev Shabbos. Now.
Oh, this all is not talking about Asar B'Teves.
Correct, not yet. Now, well, at least we'll start it. Asar B'Teves is unique from nearly all other fasts. Source 12. This is the Beis Yosef, lived in the 14th century in Seville. The Avud Raham Kasav, Be'alachos Tainis, Shiyud B'Teves, Asar B'Teves, Hu Mishudam Mishar Tainios. It is different from all other fasts. Like, why is this fast different from all other fasts? Shem Hayachal B'Shabbos Lo Yechol L'Chosel Yom Echad Acher. So we said what? That if it falls on Friday, we fast, as we know, in 5 days from now. If Asar B'Teves would fall out on Shabbos, which, again, it can't, it won't, it never will, what would we do? We would fast on Shabbos. So important is this idea of Asar B'Teves being kept in its right place, which is crazy if you think about it. We would fast, according to the Avud Raham, one of the Rishonim, one of the earlier commentators, we would fast, we would not push it off. We would fast on Shabbos. B'fnei Shneimar, as it says, Bo ba'etzem hayom hazeh kamo b'yom kippurim. It has the same lashon, the same language. The etzem hayom hazeh is what the Torah tells us in Sefer Vayikra about Yom Kippur. It says that you're supposed to fast etzem hayom hazeh, and it calls it a Shabbos Shabboson, right? It's like the ultimate Shabbos. And in Yechezkel, sorry.
So then why is it only a small fast?
Ah, very good. Excellent. That's why it's like, it is it, but it isn't. It's like half. We take the chumrah of this, but we don't. And it's all theoretical because it would never fall on Shabbos. But based off of, and the simple answer is because one is from the Torah and one's from Yechezkel. So it's just a step down. It's Divrei Nevi'im versus Divrei, doesn't mean it's not important. It's just not as important as in the Torah telling me a clear command to fast on the 10th of Tishrei. So the pasuk says in source 14 in Yechezkel, Es etzem hayom hazeh. You'll fast on this very day. What did it say by Yom Kippur? Etzem hayom hazeh. Same language. So just as it says etzem hayom hazeh by Yom Kippur, and by Asar B'Teves, it says Shabbos Shabbosom by Yom Kippur, which means we can do it even on Shabbos. It's as important as Shabbos. So too, Asar B'Teves is learned from Yom Kippur of all places, and it could also be Doche Shabbos. Again, incredibly theoretical, but still important. It's still clearly something there to say. So is it a minor fast? Yes, but apparently you may have to separate it a little bit from the other minor fasts because it is pretty important. It's learned from Yom Kippur. Doesn't mean it's a deraisa, because it doesn't say in the Torah, thou shalt afflict yourself on the 10th of Teves like it does by the 10th of Tishrei.
Was it the first of the minor major fast? Like in the timeline, was it the first one?
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking
So that
now.
might be why, because it just.
I have to double check that it wasn't before Tzom Gedalia. When was Gedalia murdered? I have
But
to
that.
CE. My years are always.
That still wasn't major because it wasn't like everyone. It was.
Correct. Right. I mean, and Shiva Asar B'Tammuz is much closer. So Shiva Asar B'Tammuz is definitely closer to the Korban. Right, that's 3 weeks before, as we know. So I believe I just have to double check that it's before Gedaliah's murder, the assassination. But that's a fair question to ask, regardless. But nonetheless, so it can be Doche Shabbos theoretically. Again, it won't be. But at the very least, what we can learn practically from this, if it can be Doche Shabbos, if it can override Shabbos, it for sure can override Erev Shabbos. This idea of not fasting on Erev Shabbos, right, because we want to go into the meal with an appetite, but not too much of an appetite, right, hungry but not starving, kind of thing. So then, for sure, we could fast on Friday. At the very least, that's what we're learning. Practically, it will never fall out on Shabbos. Okay, and the Mishnah Berurah says this is the exception. The Mishnah Berurah says, in Elu be'erev Shabbos, Hai lishna gamkin lav dafka, this is source 15, I'm sorry. L'chol dala tzomos gamkin yeshel l'chol be'erev Shabbos. I'm just telling you right now, practically speaking, the calendar works itself out that none of the other minor fasts can fall out on Friday. In fact, I don't think any fast can ever fall out on Friday. Leviakviu samavora le'el b'simin tafkol ches ki im asar b'teis sovad. That is the exception. Why that is, on a practical calendar level, I don't know. But it does, as we know. The 10th of Teves does, in fact, fall out on Friday, as we'll see in only a few days' time. It is the exception, and that is what we do. So that's this idea. Maybe we'll do the Chassam Sofer next week. Just start with that. Chassam Sofer is more about the future, so it's appropriate to do it the day after Asar B'Teves or 2 days after Asar B'Teves, and then we'll go back to davening. But nonetheless, I think there's this important idea where we're allowed to fast on a Friday. It's not ideal. We wouldn't do it if it wasn't a Tainus Sibor, that's for sure. And it's important enough to fast on a Friday. Usually we wouldn't fast on a Friday. We don't want to be starving going into Shabbos. It's not Kavod Shabbos. Davening will look a little different. We'll try to make it a little earlier to avoid certain concerns ruining our Shabbos preparation as much as we can. But ultimately, we can in fact fast Asar B'Teves, the only fast that can be done on a Friday, maybe on a halachic level, maybe more on a practical level. Okay, we'll finish with the Chassam Sofer because that's more about the future anyways next week, and then we'll go back to Tefilah. Thank you.